Art of the Rural is honored to support 5 Plain Questions. We are a collaborative organization that works to resource artists and culture bearers across the country. Together, we build relationships, change narratives, and bridge divides. Across the last 15 years, we've collaborated with individuals and communities from a range of cultural and geographic backgrounds to contribute towards a more equitable and healthy future for rural and Indian country. We invite folks to check out some of our work. Our Rural-Urban Exchange strengthens intercultural networks through a locally focused creative leadership program. Our Spillway Initiative supports artists and culture bearers to cultivate relationships along the upper Mississippi River region. And our High Visibility Initiative creates podcasts, exhibitions, and publications that share nuanced and complex perspectives on contemporary life in rural and Indian country. If folks would like to learn more about our work, please visit artoftherural.org.
Hello, and welcome again to another episode of 5 Plain Questions, a podcast that proposes 5 questions to Indigenous artists, creators, musicians, writers, movers and shakers, and culture bearers, people in the community that are doing great things for their communities. I'm Joe Williams, your host for this conversation. My goal is to showcase these amazing people from our Indigenous communities from around the region and country. I want to introduce you to Suzan Shown Harjo. Suzan Shown Harjo is a Cheyenne citizen. Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Muscogee, she is a 6-decade champion for Native rights, founder and president of the Morningstar Institute, and former executive director of the National Congress of the American Indians and Native American Rights Fund. She helped win landmark laws like the American Indian Religious Freedom Act of 1979, the National Museum of the American Indian Act of 1989, and Native American Graves Protection Act of 1990. Harjo led campaigns to end Native mascots, helped return over 1 million acres of indigenous land, and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2014. She remains a leading voice for indigenous culture and legal rights. So, with that said, let's jump into part 2 of our conversation with Suzan Shown Harjo. Sure. Well, we're also sort of into this next question, but how has your career developed, and how did college sort of intersect with this process for you?
Well, college is something I've only taught at or lectured at. I didn't go to college. Mm-hmm. I was homeschooled most of the time when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in El Reno, sometimes in Beggs, sometimes in Hodulgee, and then much of the time that I was in Napoli, I went to school. And after high school, when I came back, I went to high school in Oklahoma City, lived with an aunt and uncle. And I wasn't interested in finishing school, and my parents were shocked because education was the goal for them. You have to be educated, you have to go to college, you have to do this. And I was ready to just quit school as a high school student. And so the deal was that I didn't have to live with my parents in San Antonio, Texas, where they had been stationed after Italy, and lived with my aunt, not my favorite aunt and uncle on my mom's side in Oklahoma City. And just kind of breezed through that, and I was much more interested in the extracurricular things I was doing, and trying to just understand the difference. It's a very different world. I mean, in Italy, when I wasn't swimming or playing basketball, I was fencing. I mean, that was one thing that was one of our, there was no such thing as PE. And then I went to this high school in Oklahoma City, where physical exercise meant jumping jacks with a bunch of other girls for an hour.
Sure, sure. Yes, the climbing rope and all the,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I was so far past that. It was my just physicality. I was, at my strongest ever in my life. And I mean, I swam the Straits of Messina, and here I am doing jumping jacks. So I was not interested in school at all. And one of our we had a school assembly, and Clyde Warrior, who was he was a Ponca fancy dancer, so he was very famous in Oklahoma, amongst Native people, but also amongst non-Native people, because he was a dancer, and that was a big deal to everyone. And he had a whole youth development thing where he started Oklahoma Indian Youth Council, and then he was one of the founders of the National Indian Youth Council. So he came to, after he did the school assembly, which was really terrific, and where he stressed, student rights and voting rights and things you could do as a student to advocate for this and that and better conditions. And then he came to meet with the Native students who were juniors and seniors. And so I was part of that meeting. And he was just inspirational. He really was just brilliant and quite a poet. He wasn't a poet, but he was really quite a poet, and knew how to recruit people and how to persuade you and inspire you. He was very good at what he did. And so one of the things he talked about with us was recruiting us for the No Mascots movement, because he was trying to get rid of Little Red, the dancing idiot, was what the Native people called it, from the University of Oklahoma. Big Red, so there was this diminutive mascot, Little Red, for Big Red. And it used to be that all the schools just had colors. They weren't animals, or they weren't Indians. And then they became animals and Indians with the sameness that you get there. And so he was trying to get rid of Little Red and recruited us for that. And a lot of us worked on that for a while. And then I did. Then later I went to New York. And so I was also working with people that he had been working with at Stanford, but mostly with Dartmouth and with Syracuse University and St. John's in New York City and on the East Coast. And that Syracuse University is not in New York City, but in the middle of New York, and is right by Onondaga Nation. So, and then I had a lot of friends at Dartmouth, so I would go up there. And then when my husband came, when we got together, we began to split up that kind of work or do it together. And we had a lot of different circles that we were parts of, and were able to make a lot of headway. And all of that came from not going to school, really, which I don't recommend. I mean, what I've done, I did it the hard way. I mean, you still have to learn all this stuff, but you have to learn it on your own. And sometimes that's not a satisfactory or certainly not a quick way to learn it. But you don't have all sorts of impediments in the way of your learning it. But it was at a time of rebellion, and where Bob Dylan was one of the few people whose words you could trust. So those were the times, and they were a change, and there were lots of things that resonated with our experience as Native peoples, and then a lot of things that didn't. The kids against parents and grandparents did not resonate with me or with a lot of us, but the Vietnam War and what was happening there and the duplicity about it, and lots of people, mainly poor people of color, getting poor people and people of color getting drafted, and so you had that resurgence of rights groups and circles that were developing, and all sort of under the umbrella of the anti-Vietnam War movement. And that was one thing that attracted me to WBAI, because the best reporting was done by the Pacifica journalists and stringers in Vietnam and in Cambodia, and by others who were in Washington and knew really how to analyze the news. And our station was sort of like a feeder station to CBS when the news was run by Walter Cronkite, and he would Paul Fisher, who was the head of the WBAI newsroom. He went to work with Cronkite, and because WBAI had been in leadership of lots of things that were changing, and had been actively involved in reporting on a lot of things that others weren't used to reporting on, and our newsroom was a very different newsroom. It didn't rely so much on the same old stuff. The rip and read teletype machine was Reuters and Agence France Presse, and so you said, okay, this is what they know in France from having reported on this, having been participants in a war there and having lost, and now there are reporters on it from that experience. So you have to take that into account and understand that, and that's real experience talking right there. And anyway, we did have an edge on things, in addition to doing, and there were things that we could do through the arts that most people couldn't do. Political points you could make just because it was a play, or you could do things that really were almost silly, just to try and see what they sounded like. Philip Glass, who was such a fine musician, did a program that I gave him an hour of my time for, and he couldn't get it from the music department, but I thought it was worthy, and it was an hour of boiling water, and he did nothing to it. He just let it boil and mic'd it and recorded it until it boiled down, and that was it. That was the hour. So it's the sort of thing that it's not as important maybe as the latest Gore score from Vietnam, but it meant something that you could do that and try it and say, does anyone, this is as close to meditation as a lot of people ever get. And we had an audience that was full of stoners. Oh, great. When you turn off a mic, they call that white noise, right? That's what Orson Welles liked about, he asked his sound effects guys. I learned this from, they had written a book collectively, and I did a program with a bunch of these old FX guys, and who had done this, that Orson Welles had asked him to give him the sound of falling snow. He said, we tried everything. We tried feathers. We tried actual falling snow. It didn't work. Nothing worked. Nothing sounded like the sound of falling snow. But then one time he just turned off the mic and it was the white noise. And Wells said, that's it. That's the sound of falling snow. So boiling water was along those lines. And so we could do it. We were doing the first of, we were doing poetry readings by former Vietnam combat veterans who were now against the war. Very important thing that was happening. We were doing reporting on and arts programming on the blacklisting period that no one had touched for about 20 years. And a lot of people didn't want to do programming on that period, and I did, because most of us weren't alive during that. We don't know what happened. We need to know the signs. What was going on? What happened? And a lot of people are still alive. Let's interview them. And Eric Bentley, a playwright, had written a play, Are You Now or Have You Ever Been, about the HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee's investigation into show business and the blacklisting. And so he had a very important play that had been at Yale, and he wanted it done in New York, but didn't have a venue. So we provided the venue, and it was the New York premiere, and we carried it live on the air with an in studio. We had a huge studio of a former church with a choir loft and everything. So you had a lot of room for audience and great sound. So we had we did that, and I got some of the original people to do their parts in it. Like Lillian Hellman, the playwright, who was so brilliant, had written a really important letter to the committee saying that she wouldn't testify and giving her reasons. And it was, I shall not cut my conscience to fit this year's fashion. So she was saying why she wouldn't do it. So we had her in, and she agreed to do a recorded inset for her part. And I agreed not to maintain any of the outtakes. And I've regretted that, but not that I kept the promise, but just making the promise because it was a wonderful thing where she would stop and she would say, I never liked this word. One of the lawyers insisted that I put in this word and it should have been this word. And she went through the whole thing, and we had about 100 takes on this short letter. Mm-hmm. And then finally, she sort of broke it up into 3 parts, and we had something that we could slice together or splice together. And Lionel Stander, there were others who played themselves as taped insets. And then we followed that with the round table with some very important people who had been blacklisted. Yip Harburg, E.Y. Harburg, who wrote Somewhere Over the Rainbow, who wrote the lyrics, and other Annie Revere, who was the mother in National Velvet and had been a really popular and in-demand character actor until someone named her in one of these hearings, and she was blacklisted for a long time. So we had a lot of people like that. And then I did individual, a lot of us did, but the ones that I did individual, very lengthy like 4-hour interviews. I did one with Ring Lardner Jr., who really personalized it. And he had a stammer, and he said when he testified, they used that against him because they would say, well, what about this? And he would start to say, but he stammered and he couldn't get it out. And the chairman would say, so you refuse to answer, or so we can infer that you admit that this happened. And so he said they were really distorting everything. And then he talked about how it was to be blacklisted. And he said at one point in his life, the most popular program was on TV was Robin Hood. And his kids were the age where his son and all his friends would come over to their house to watch Robin Hood. And they were just huge fans. And he had written it, but he had written it under someone else's name. And he couldn't say, I wrote it. And his child was not able to say, my father wrote this. Yeah, yay. They just saw him as, someone who was always hanging around the house. And who knows what he did? Did he have a job or not? So he could have been a hero, and that totally deprived of that. So it was an amazing interview. And I just, every year that I was at WBAI, I just was able to do so many wonderful things and be a part of so much of history being made, and being able to do the first of this and the first of that, the first feminist poetry reading, the first, this, that, the other thing, the first Native, XX and X. We did a continued tomorrow reading using the readers who were Native readers or just regular Native people who read part of a chapter or a chapter, and we would cut that, and they would do it every day at a certain hour. Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. So that was, as it was becoming really popular. So there were things like that where you knew that you were affecting all of society by what you were doing, and that it mattered, that everything mattered, and that you had an obligation to do certain things. So it was, everyone was feeling pretty morally superior, people of justice and all of that. And really hammering out things in staff meetings that, people don't usually meet about, and the value, and how can we make this a more responsive to this wonderful vehicle we have, more responsive to this community or that community. So that was all my background in doing things and having, a lot of success, no matter how you measure it, leading up to coming to Washington. And we just sort of continued with that through just being able to say, oh, this is how we can achieve what became the repatriation laws. This is how we can achieve a new museum, the National Museum of the American Indian. This is how we can do this and that. It was a time of synthesizing all that we had known and learned and uncovered, so that we could make something new that we had been looking for and thinking about. And it's sort of like, what it is once you see it, once you envision it, you say, oh, okay, this is how we get there. We just didn't know the name of it, or we didn't understand that this is something that's done all the time, or that this is something that's never done. So people would say to us, oh, that's impossible. You'll never get that done. That didn't mean anything to us. We, of course, thought we could do everything and that nothing was impossible. So a lot of things that we got done were like that. And it was just, what? There are limits? And, it, just all of the people that we grew up with, really, and worked with, who were tribal leaders and national leaders and the best of the culture bearers and cultural leaders. And we did a lot of cross-cultural kind of work, both internationally, with other Native peoples, but also with other peoples. And just that idea of building coalitions is, I think, so important, and certainly important when you're doing legislative work. So that's WBAI was probably, and Carolyn Goodman salons, and working with great writers and great theater people was probably better than my having gone to Yale School of Drama, done all these other wonderful things, and certainly for me, a better way of learning. It's not the way I would advise anyone, including my own children and now grandchildren, but it is the way that it could be done once upon a time.
Well, once upon a time, but also the type of person who's able to do that, with that sort of um, confidence that you had learned early on, that you were able to move forward and sort of create your own path and create your own opportunities. I guess this leads me to the question that I'm really curious about, because you've been in a very special place during a very special time where either opportunities had presented themselves, different types of opportunities, and I think are would either present themselves or be available to anyone else, really. And I'm just kind of curious on how how those things evolved, or how you were able to create those things in the place that you've been in.
Well, we knew a lot of people from Oklahoma and elsewhere who were working in the Nixon administration. Well, we knew some who were in the Johnson administration, but really the ones we were close to were in the Nixon administration. Native people who had jobs at one point. There were a bunch of Native men who were called the Katzenjammer kids, who were the staff of the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, Louis Bruce, who was one of the first BIA commissioners. And so every so often we would go to the BIA building by the Interior Department building and see one of our friends, and they would give us a booklet of GTRs, and that's government travel request. And it would have about 50 things that looked like airline tickets. And you could go to one airline and book flights on one of these GTRs from New York to Washington to Oklahoma City to Phoenix, Arizona, to LA, to San Francisco, to Portland, to Missoula, to Rapid City, and Chicago, and back to New York. You could go, that would be on one of those GTR coupons. And it was highly illegal for us to do that, but not really. We were given it. We were gifted. And by our own people who thought it was important to empower Native people who were activists and who were journalists and who were trying to build coalitions, empower us with the ability to get around, which was a tremendous gift, because no one had any money. And the work that we were doing, I mean, it was, you have a fabulous job with the nonprofit listener-sponsored radio station. And that means no one's making any money. You're barely getting by. And to have free travel everywhere that you needed to go and time to do that. We had the kind of job that you could do that with. We could time, ceremonies with political gatherings. We could time this with that. And that was a tremendous advantage in what we were doing, and a real everything that I've done since that time was made possible by that. By at that particular time, as we were all trying to figure things out and trying to build coalitions with each other and build a national Native coalition to move toward the same things, which were mainly cultural, but also health and education. And you just learned where your real strength was out of this area or this area. And what Native Nation happened to have at that time, some brilliant people. And while others may have people who really wanted to do stuff, but they wanted to do the heavy lifting. They didn't want to be the thinkers about it. They just wanted to know, what do you need me to do? And then they would go do that. So it just taught a lot about strategy, about it was like a military strategy, almost moving large groups of people in a certain direction that we had all agreed on. So everything was it was easier than it sounds and more difficult, but it was made tremendously easier by the fact that we had the Nixon administration GTRs. And other people we know had them too. And that's how the first Indian Studies department at a department level at a major university at the University of Minnesota was developed by Roger Buffalo Head, who was the first chair of it,
Sure.
who had lots of people who were moving in that direction and making the tribal colleges and universities movement advancing that movement. And lots of people were doing lots of things, and they were able to do that because of our gifts of GTRs. I think it might have been one of the greatest best uses of Nixon money that ever heard of.
It sounds a little clandestine, to be honest.
It was. Well, we just did it so openly because we felt we were. Of course, we were entitled to that. Look at all the land we gave.
Sure.
We never really. We always felt like this, of course, is something that we should have part of, because of the inequities of the past. It never occurred to us, or never, it wasn't as if we were doing anything wrong. That we didn't feel that way. Maybe some did, but we knew enough not to shout it from the rooftops. But anyone who wanted to take a look at anything would have seen, oh, these people, look at
there's so much I want to ask you because there's been so many things you've been involved in, and I want to be respectful of your time. So uh, maybe at some point we can do another episode down the road because I have other questions. But um, what would you say to the 18 to 22-year-old that's listening to this conversation?
Go to school, because it's easier to go to school where you're taken care of, really, even if you have to work your way through it. Um, and where you learn a lot of things and you're exposed to a lot of things that you might not have the good fortune to be exposed to in a really positive way if you're not in school. It's just a concentrated way of learning and being credentialed. And that's so important, especially now. In my day, you could sort of get away with it, but even in my time, if you hadn't gone to school or to an Ivy League school or something, people really kind of look down on you in certain areas. And so with me, I was helped by not having that kind of burden that I'd been doing stuff rather than going to school and learning stuff. But I was learning by doing stuff. And so I had a lot more experience than a lot of people. But that's not the right way to do it. It's not the time to do it. If I hadn't been in New York City, I probably would have, it would have been preferable to go to school. But it is so important now, and it is the easier way. So I would just encourage people to go to school, stay in school, and whatever school it is, if it's a community college, if it's a tribal college, if it's Indian studies, or if you don't know what you want to do, go to Indian studies in a university or a college, where they at least have Indian studies programs, if not a whole degree in it or a whole department. And to really listen carefully to the people who have the most experience and the people who have the greatest knowledge about your people. Because those are the experts, those are the visionaries, those are the people who are closest in time and thought and practice to the best of our peoples that we attain, that we strive to attain. So that's and to write, to read and write, because if you write, you can do anything. You can always get a job if you can write. If you can write, you can do all sorts of different kinds of writing. If you can't write, it's a real burden. If you can't write, and if you don't read well, that's a real burden. Whether it's online or books or comic books or whatever it might be, you have to be someone who has a huge capacity for intake, and to be able to translate that into something that is a motivator or a path or a way of finally attaining something that people have wanted, for your whole lifetime, and for your nation's longest period or the original instructions to your people from creation, that what, and some of the prophecies, where you can actually make some of those things actualize. And that's what we do. It's not superhuman, it's not impossible, and it's not foolish or anything. The only thing that's foolish is to buy into a stereotype. So to not buy into the layers of stereotypic persona that people have overlain on you over centuries, some of them, and to not be susceptible to flattery, and to make alliances in the same way that in all our peoples have similar kinds of instructions, like, you know, choose your friends like you would choose people you would take into battle. Very important thing. It makes you think about people in another way. They can still be your friends, but would you trust them fighting right next to you? Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe this person is too scared, or this person is kind of turns tail and runs, or this person is only for themselves, or it makes you understand character traits in a way that you might not otherwise. The Cheyenne, an early Cheyenne instruction is that a lot of people say is in their history, but it's not. It was given to the Cheyenne people, saying the nation shall be strong so long as the hearts of the women are not on the ground. Now just absorb that for a while, and that gives an instruction to everyone, to the men, to the women, to the boys, to the girls, to be optimistic, to be hopeful, to always look for that solution, and being open to it. You'll find it one way or another, or it will find you, but you have to be receptive. And that comes from hope and optimism. And so that's the job of the Cheyenne women, is to keep that, what my friend Jesse Jackson was always saying, keep hope alive, right? That's exactly that kind of thing that you are born with and live into. And for the instruction to the men is very simple, where you don't do anything that would impair the women, that would hurt the women or discourage them from finding the solutions to whatever problems we have. So within each dance, within each ceremony, within each law that a nation or a tribe has, you understand. I mean, that's there as a result of centuries of getting it right, of trying things that didn't turn out right. And what's left is this path is the right one, rather than all of these other distractive kinds of possibilities that veer you from that path that's the right one. So just understanding that collective knowledge and the experience thinking about it and the experience articulating it. The best of the native speakers, for example, will say, I'm not fluent. I have so much to learn. And they will talk about not developing fluency in the revitalization of languages movement, but in developing conversational and relationship kinds of uses of the language. And that's why people couple elders with very young people and have immersion sessions, so that you get that relationship, language, and the way of learning and the way of teaching. So all of that is just mightily important. And I think for young people, it sort of seems every so often, I've been asked by younger people, is there anything that's left to do? You guys did all sorts of things. You did this or that. And yeah, we did this or that and this and that. And there's still a whole world of stuff to do because it's outdated, or what we did worked for a while but doesn't work anymore, or we were thwarted. We had a good plan and a good law, but it was thwarted by bad administrations, or different ways that we were looked at in general society. So there are things to be done, even with the good things that we've achieved. And there can never be enough writing history right out of all of the history that's been written about wrongly and presented wrongly, and making films that, no matter how many our native filmmakers make, they'll never be able to get past what Hollywood has done. And it'll take maybe another century for that. And to keep that constantly in mind, that you have to go with what the people think they know right now, and present them with something else that's a viable alternative that they may never think about. So just a million reasons for respecting elders, and for respecting and understanding place and the importance of place, because some places just are imbued, as some people are, but some places are definitely imbued and have a power of their own, and are just a power center of the universe, certainly of this Mother Earth, a power center. And many of those places are right here in our own hemisphere and in Turtle Island, where people have gone for millennia. Sometimes you go to a place because it's commemorative of something that occurred there. Other times you go to a place because of the place itself, and you have this kind of relationship with that place and with that land and with that water, and responsibility for that land and water, and an obligation to be renewed when you go there, and to not wait too long for that renewal. Just to understand your place in the world and your place in time, and to understand your role at any given time. Everyone has leadership qualities of some kind, but you can't have just one person be the leader of everything all the time. That person gets burned out. That person has too much on their shoulders. What lessens that burden is giving them time to be a follower, because good leaders are really good followers, and you have to have good followership protocols, just like you have to have good leadership protocols, and to be able to have people, when you're making a proposition for a certain course of action, or a certain kind of law, or a certain kind of policy or action of some kind, it's so essential to have people who are part of the receiving of information group, who have been in leadership position, because they can size it up in a minute as to what sounds like it might work. And that's all you can know, is this might work. We might have a chance, and let's take a chance on this. Or it's a little too risky, let's not do that. But that discussion leads to another kind of course of action. And to have elder people and leaders, and people who have led stuff in among that group of people who need to make the decision about which way people are going to go, or who can sway the thinking of people. Everyone talks about you develop a consensus, but consensus only means majority. It's not that everyone has to agree. It's just that you think out loud and you make your points to the point where each person is satisfied that they no longer have to press their objection, that everyone understands what the hazards are, what the potential for failure might be, what the risk might be involved. And that was your purpose all along, is that we all understand that. So we know what we're doing because we have that information. That's a huge kind of process to undertake. And really thrilling when it all works. I mean, hugely thrilling. It's comparable to almost the birth of a child, or doing something, monumental like that. It's really satisfactory to do something really, really well, and for everything that you've thought about to come together. And you always know how many thousands of people help bring that result. And the people who don't keep that in mind are kind of doomed, because they begin to believe their own press, or believe that they did something, that no one else could have done. Well, no one else in my position, with my experiences, or anyone else with my positions, my experiences, influences, relations, nations, could have done the same thing. It's just some people don't have all that good fortune. And we had the good fortune of white people chasing us all around the plains for the Cheyennes and trying to kill us, and they didn't, and managed not to kill all our ancestors. So they have us, the people they fought hard to keep things for and to do things for. And the same with our Muscogee people, the people that Andrew Jackson fought so hard, and the Georgians, and a lot of the ancestors of now the good people of the South, who wanted to ethnically cleanse the whole of their colonies and then their states, and you still have the residuals of that. All of that is stuff you have to know and be aware of and understand. If you understand your history, you understand why some people will be so reluctant to do a certain kind of thing, because they see how perilous it is at any given time. When you have a good president in office who's, hope and goodwill for the world, and really seems to have an open heart, that's very different from having a really bad, self-serving, greedy, grifter in office who would destroy you or take steps to destroy you in a minute. So you can be you can do a different kind of advocacy. You can do a different kind of, you can take risks that you might not otherwise with general leadership in the U.S. that's appealing to the better instincts of people rather than to their worst instincts. Because we know what happens to our peoples when the other side has people who want to kill us. We know what that is and what happens. We have family history about that. And we know it up to the modern time. And how quickly something positive moving can turn into something negative moving just by the flip of an election. So we have to always be cognizant of the world around us, while at the same time being centered in our places where we know the most and our subjects where we know the most. What can we hang on to? What can we rely on? We can rely on that place. We can rely on this instruction. We can rely on these people who said this, who said that. We can rely on what these people did. When you know those kinds of things, it's everything seems pretty easy because it's been mapped out for you. And you when you first start asking yourself, do you really think that you're able to do this? Do you really think this is a possibility, or is this just pie in the sky? And if the answer is yes, it's an answer that comes more readily from your background and experience of having strength in the peoples and in the people who carried that on and transmitted it to you and invested in you to this time. And those who don't know that history need to learn it really fast, because that's the only way you know the signs.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. Thank you. So what's on the horizon for you? What's coming next for you?
Well, I want to do more writing, and I want to do more oral history kinds of things, just because we're always asking, and it's a canon of construction in federal Indian law, that you interpret treaties in the ways that the Native people themselves who made the treaties would have understood. What did they think they were doing at that time? That's how you interpret the treaties, not how did they interpret this word or that word. We can all see what happened with mistranslations and deliberate mistranslations and coercion and that sort of thing. But what did the Native people at the time think they were doing? And I think there are too few of us who are really laying out our own times and articulating what we've done. And mainly because we work so much in cleaning up the past and trying to take corrective measures to deal with the past, with the horrors of the past and inequities of the past, the injustices. So we need to so that you never really get to the point where you've done that, but you're not explaining it, you're not transmitting that knowledge. And I think probably I need to do some of that. So. So that's what I'm doing, whether it's through writing a play or helping with the screenplay or writing poetry or writing a chapter in a book or doing some just oral history interviews. All of that. There's the design. I mean, the idea of my doing that now, as opposed to a lot of other things I could be doing, it is for that purpose of leaving a record of the thinking that went into it. I mean, I would love to know what my mother's great-grandfather, Chief Bull Bear, thought. He was the head of the Dog Soldiers Society, the Dogmen Society of the Cheyennes, when the Dogmen Society was made up of more than half of the families of the Cheyenne, the whole Cheyenne Nation. He was the first signatory to the Treaty of Medicine Lodge Creek in 1867. I would love to have known what was he thinking of at that time. What did he prioritize? What did he think of, right after this? And we know a lot about what he did because journalists were present. They saw the Dogmen Society people and Bull Bear and other leaders ride them from across the river, across the Medicine Lodge Creek, because they stayed on the opposite side of the river from the U.S. treaty delegates and from the Arapahos and from other societies of the Cheyennes. And in the mornings, they would cross the river on horseback and then gallop right up to the tent, to the white people's tent, and it'd be clouds of dust. I mean, and they would do it in full outfits, full regalia. What a sight. I mean, they must have been he was someone who knows how tall he was, but tall. He was reported to be 6'7" or 7 feet or somewhere in between. And he was not one of the tallest of the Cheyennes. And they were so fit and so, they only ate deer and elk and bass and trout and had gardens and ate corn and all of the good things and were as fit as anyone. And so, I mean, we know a lot about the spectacle of some of our ancestors and what they did to make an impression. And they didn't do that just to say, look how cool we are. They did it to say, we are formidable and you never were able to kill us all. And here you are wanting to make a treaty with us. This is who we are. This is who you're making the treaty with. What a thing it would be to hear him say exactly what he thought, or any of the others. So that's what we have the advantage of being able to do in this time and in future times that people didn't have in the past, or wouldn't do, or couldn't analyze certain things in certain ways just because it was unsafe, or they might be endangering people's lives, because all of it was life and death, all of it. And things that are life and death but slow genocide today are equally serious. It's just not as clearly defined as being chased all over the plains or all over the southeast bayous and swamps. and watching your people die right in front of you and not being able to bury them, or going back and visiting their scaffold or their grave and finding they're robbed, they're taken. Who would do that? Why? So there are things we've done to correct some of those things. And I think it's important that people know how important it is to strategize, and how important to understand that even though me at 80, looking back on my life, can make direct lines and arcs to each thing that caused me to get from there to here, but that wasn't something I knew then. There were all sorts of circumstances and other people and other peoples and other bits of knowledge and other ways that I understood, other systems I understood, that enabled me to go from one point to one point and to emphasize one thing rather than emphasize another, and to realize that this would happen if you did this. No, sometimes you're in the middle of something and you really do feel that you are an instrument, and that you have something like free will and are an instrument at the same time. And once you appreciate that, and the how profound and how spiritual everything is, and when you look back and say, and it's foolhardy to say, I did this and I'm so happy about that. No, it's like your ancestors reaching through time and guiding you. A little more of this, a little less of that. Try this. Take heart. Remain. Always keep the positive in mind, and that is the goal. And that the death you see around you is not you, and it's not your future. It's something to learn from and to overcome. So all of that is really about understanding your place in the world. And however you achieve that humility and that perspective, it may be going to a sacred place and just being there alone, or being there in ceremony, or being there in quietude. It's will make you realize who you are at that point in time, and how vulnerable you are, how strong you are. It makes you realize the possibilities and the endlessness of those possibilities.
Suzanne, thank you so much for all of this and joining me here on the podcast. This was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that does it for this episode of 5 Plain Questions. I want to thank Suzanne again for her time and sharing her story with us. The second part was truly a fantastic close to a 2-part interview. Generally, interviews that run a little longer, we really cut those down to try to fit it into the 1 episode format. But there was so much good information, such great stories, that I wanted to include as much as I could. So we made the editorial decision to make it 2 episodes, and I'm completely happy with having done that. So Suzanne, thank you for everything, and I deeply appreciate the time that you have spent with me and our audience. I also want to thank you for joining us and spending your time listening to what I feel is a very important story and perspective from our community. So please, join us next time as we speak with another incredible person. I'm Joe Williams. Thank you for listening to 5 Plain Questions. Your support keeps these conversations going. You can follow us on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky. And to stay connected, visit us at 11warriorarts.com to explore past episodes, check out our exclusive merch, and to sign up for our upcoming newsletter. It's been a while coming, but it'll be here shortly. So just know that every listen, share, and purchase helps support this podcast. Support from this podcast also comes from Art of the Rural, working to advance rural culture and equity through collaboration, media, and the arts. And also subscribe to them on Substack. You will hear some great interviews, you will see amazing articles, and you'll see contributions from myself as well. So, well, that does it. You take care, and I'll see you next time. This has been an 11 Warrior Arts production.